Hello! It's been some time since I've made a video, and I specifically designed this class because I've had it on the brain for a long while. Um, I'm Amoni Fanala, and this is a class to benefit everyone, but I'm using the Eve University format because that's the one I think will work best for this. Eve University does have a class on this called How Not to Die in a Jump Freighter. However, it is very rarely taught, and it is designed to be used with a practical on CC, uh, but since that class was designed, CC is no longer available. CCP removed access to CC on a regular basis, and now it's only open on very special occasions when they want to test something. So this class is meant purely for theoretical guidance. There's no practical aspect. I'm not going to show you jump freightering. I think that would actually be somewhat dangerous for me to try and do. So I'm not going to show you jump freightering. I am just going to teach you how it works. Um, so we are talking about jump freightering today. We're going to talk all about jump freighters. We're going to talk about how they differ from regular freighters. We'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of jump freighters, the skills you need to fly them, how to plot a route, including choosing midpoints and whether you should use a structure or a station. We'll also talk about Cyno alts and the skills you need to train on your Cyno alt and how to use them effectively. Um, so, what are jump freighters? Well, they come in four varieties, just as with regular freighters. There's the ARC, which is your all-arounder. It's your workhorse, and it requires helium isotopes. That's going to be important in a little bit. I'll explain. You also have the Nomad from the Minmatar. It is considered the fast one because it aligns slightly faster than the others, and so you know that's cool, I guess. Hydrogen isotopes. There are drawbacks here. Now, for example, like the Nomad, um, while it is fast, it also has the smallest cargo hold. So you're picking and choosing your trade-offs here. The Rhea, which is by far the most popular, um, has the largest cargo hold, and it requires nitrogen isotopes. The Anshar, um, is the tankiest, and it requires oxygen isotopes. Now, jump freighters are T2 freighters equipped with a jump drive. This is not a module that you fit to it, it's just part of the ship. They have a jump drive that allows you to travel great distances in a single jump. Instead of gating from one system to the next like you would with a regular freighter, you are going from one system and jumping to a industrial cynosural field that acts as a beacon where you're going to land. So in in the uh, in the graph here, I have an example. You're in system A, and there's another system between you, and you jump to the Cyno in system C, jumping over, skipping system B, right? Now, jump freighters are very expensive, and flying them is a high risk activity. So there are definitely some trade-offs, and we'll talk more about that in a minute here. So the advantages and disadvantages of jump freighters. The advantage is that you can cover greater distances in a shorter amount of time than a regular freighter. If you've ever flown a freighter before, which I'm assuming that many people who are watching this will have flown a regular freighter before, um, they are extremely slow. And so covering great distances is a very time-consuming activity. Jump freighters cut that time by multitudes. It is also safer to use a jump freighter when you need to go to low or nullsec. You almost never see regular freighters in low and nullsec, um, and that's just because it's too dangerous. Um, Freighters are just giant targets, and so it's much safer to use a jump freighter. Um, Doing jump freighter runs for others, like your corp or alliance mates, makes you a hero, even if they may not, um, even if they may not bow down and worship you like they should. Um, Jump freighter runs for others is extremely appreciated and makes this game possible. If you do jump freighter runs for others, you are keeping the game going. And you can also do it for profit, right? So PushX, um, Red Frog or Black Frog, whichever. Those groups do this for profit, and they oftentimes use jump freighters. Um, the disadvantages of jump freighters is, well, first off, the jump freighter itself is very expensive, anywhere from 8 bill to 10 bill for a jump freighter. That's very expensive. If you fit it with jump drive economizers, the prototype jump drive economizers, that can run you, for 3 of them, it can run you somewhere between 1 and 2 billion ISK, right? And so that gets expensive. You also need fuel for your jump freighter. Jump freighters require fuel to be able to jump, and that fuel is not super expensive, but it adds up, right? Over time, you are going to be spending billions in fuel if you do a lot of jump freightering. And you also need multiple mega accounts, okay? So this is going to require either some real world money, or you are going to have to, you know, be able to fund, Plex your accounts. So this is not a cheap activity. Um, it is also significantly higher risk. One of the reasons is that you cannot light Cynos in Hisec. So if you could light a Cyno in Hisec, this would be the easiest thing in the world. If you could go from Hisec to Hisec directly, it would be very easy. This would not be a big deal, but you can't. You can only light Cynos in Lowsec and Nullsec. Um, so jumping, so you have to jump to a Lowsec or a Nullsec, and then you can gate to Hisec, which adds a significant amount of risk. You might also pick the wrong station or structure. Stations can be camped, structures can be camped, um, and that can leave you trapped. We'll talk more about that in a bit here. You will also need to constantly resupply fuel. That includes both the isotopes for the jump freighters and the liquid ozone for your um, for your Cynos. Um, Liquid ozone is not super expensive, but the isotopes definitely add up over time. You will also need to replace the Cyno ships. You're going to lose a lot of Cyno ships. That is just the reality of the thing. People like shooting Cyno ships because they're so squishy and they're easy kills. So you will need to replace those Cyno ships quite a bit. Now, to fly a jump freighter, just to sit in it is actually quite a long skill train. If you have pilots who fly um, fly capitals, you probably have some of these skills already trained, or most of these skills already trained, but it's still quite a train. Um, so you need your Empire factions hauler skill to 3, the freighter skill to 4, jump freighters you need at least 1, Advanced Spaceship Command 5, Spaceship Command 5, Industry 5, Jump Drive Calibration 1, Jump Drive Operation 5, Navigation 5, Warp Drive Operation 5, and Science 5. This is not a short train. I think the number I saw was like it's like 100 days with no implants and no boosters to train it. So it's not a short train, and that's just to sit in the jump freighter. If you try to fly a jump freighter with just those skills, you are going to have a miserable time and be probably die, frankly. You're going to end up somewhere bad and die. Um, to fly it competently, you need jump freighters 4. You need jump drive calibration 5. Jump drive calibration 5 is pretty much non-negotiable because that is the skill that determines your distance that you can jump. Jump freighters at maximum skill can go 10 light years, and you need every last light year of range to be able to jump. If you have anything less than that, you are going to have a miserable time. Um, Jump fuel conservation 4. Obviously, you could do with less, but you are going to be spending so much more money in fuel if you don't train this to at least 4. Mechanics 5, that's tank. Hull upgrades 5, also tank. Evasive maneuvering 5, that's to protect your sanity. Shield management 4, that is also tank. And tactical shield manipulation 4, that is also tank. Okay? Now, to get around, you need to have a route. And this is a jump route, which is not the same as your gate routes. Okay? So in order to do this, you're going to become best friends with Dotlan. Dotlan is your tool, is your best friend here. Makes it a lot easier to figure out where you're going. And you're going to go to Dotlan, you're going to go to navigation, and you're going to go to jump planner. Okay? So in the jump planner, you'll enter your system where you're starting, right? Oftentimes this is Hisec, right? JITA, or one of the other trade hubs. If your destination is in Lowsec or Nullsec, you can simply add that system. Once you've added your origin system, you can add your destination system and hit go. What you're going to get back may not be the final product for your route, but it will give you a starting point. You will, in your jump planner, you will want to adjust for the specific skills of your character. I have maxed out, or almost maxed out, my character's skills, so I get pretty good results with that. You may not have Jump Freighter 5. That's a long train. You may not have Jump Fuel Conservation 5. That's a long train. That's okay. The big one is Jump Drive Calibration 5. That's the one that you need to 5, non-negotiable. Now, this is what it's going to look like when you are jumping from Hisec to Lowsec or Nullsec, right? You're going to have your Hisec starting system, your origin point, and then you're going to have your Lowsec system, right? Or your Nullsec system. And you jump there. Okay, in this example, it's just one jump because I wanted to show you what it looks like. You don't need to do anything too fancy, right? You might have several jumps, right? Oftentimes when you're going to Nullsec, it's going to be like 4, maybe somewhere like 6 or 8 jumps, right? But the principle is still the same. It doesn't change that much. But what happens if you want to go from, say, JITA to Dodixie? Let's take a look at what it looks like to figure out how to get from one Hisec to another. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is look at our destination system. In my example, we're using Dodixie. So we're going to look up Dodixie on Dotlan. You can see it's highlighted in white there. We're going to look for the nearest Lowsec system. and there's conveniently one right here, which is Deccan. Now, when we look for a low-sec system to jump to, because we can't jump directly to Dodixie, we're looking for a low-sec system that is nearby, and it has to have a high-sec connection, right? So Deccan is perfect because it connects to Ball. And that tells us this is probably a good candidate. It may be tricky sometimes. You may have to do some checking and cross-checking. You might have to look at game, but you want to make sure that a structure or a station is in that system so that you can dock. You do not ever want to be jumping into a system that has nowhere for you to dock, because you are going to be you you are going to be in real trouble if you do. So once you have your low-sec system selected, verify your route. This is Eve gate check. If you've done any hauling, hopefully this is a very familiar tool to you. You enter the low-sec system, then you enter your high-sec destination, and you just make sure that that is actually a route to your destination. You do not want to accidentally select a low sec that has a high sec connect, but the high sec is an island, right? Because that just sort of defeats the point. So be careful of that. So this is what our route looks like, right? So we start in Jita, then we jump to Kubanen, then we jump to Deccan, and then of course we're going to gate from Deccan to Ball, and then from there we're going to gate from Ball to Dodixie, right? Now, you might be looking at your midpoints and you might decide you don't like that midpoint. It might be because you see the number of kills and you're like, oh wow, that looks like a really spicy midpoint. And so you want to select a different midpoint. Now you can do this in Dotland by clicking this little icon here, and when you hover over it, it'll bring up this little search alternative system. When you click on that, it's going to bring up all the options for your alternative systems. Now some midpoints, you may not have an alternative. It might just be that one system. And if that's the case, then patience is key, intel is key. So being aware of what's happening in that system. Oftentimes your Cyno alt can act as your sort of eyes and your intel gathering, because your Cyno is already going to be there. You want to get as much intel about that system as you can. Check zkill, check Eve gate check, all these things. Just be aware of what's happening there. But if you want to find another midpoint, right, there are a couple of things you need to keep in mind. So in my example here, what I've done is I've brought up the alternative midpoints. These are systems that you can jump to from Jita that will still allow you to jump to Deccan afterwards, right? So they're within range of these two systems. Now what I've done is I've clicked on the jumps and sorted it by jumps. And this tells you how many jumps have occurred into this system in the last, I don't know if it's 24 hours or something like that, but lower the better, right? It's a low traffic system. Okay. I'm also looking at these icons next to the system names. So this little target looking one, that one tells us that there's a Hisec connect. And so in the system of Estuanit or whatever, Estuanit is going to tell us, or has a Hisec system, okay, that it's connected to, but it doesn't have a station. So I'm not going to use that one. The next best option would be Ragnar, which has a station, does not have a Hisec connect. Some people might prefer to have a system that has both the station and the Hisec connect when they're going through low sec. You, I don't care because that's just not a thing that I mean. I jump freighter to null all the time, so I I'm not going to have Hisec connects anyways. So whatever. But the most important thing is that it has a structure, that you have a structure or a station in system. Um, and we'll talk about the differences between those two in a little bit. But pay attention to that. Another thing you might want to pay attention to is your distances. How far away how far away is it? How much fuel are you using? Right. So this jump route breakdown is going to tell you how much fuel you need to go from each jump, and then at the bottom here it gives you the total of your fuel consumption. Um, I said I'd go over structure and stations, so let's do that now. Structures have the benefit of allowing your alt to tether while you wait to light your Cyno. It also allows your jump freighter to tether. So when you're about to jump to the next structure or station and you undock, you're tethered. As soon as your invuln timer expires, you're tethered. So um, it it would take a Herculean effort um, to be able to put you in danger when you're tethered. Doesn't mean you're 100% safe, but tethering is a pretty nice thing to have. Um, Structures are also really easy to position your Cyno for lighting and quick docking. Um, we'll talk more about positioning your Cyno in a minute here, but structures make this very easy, or fairly easy. Finding the right position for where your Cyno should be when you light it is a thing that you need to keep in mind, and structures are very easy to do that with. Um, so, um, your the structure that you're jumping to, and then may jump to the next. It could be positioned in a good location to have a view of the gates. So this is especially important if you're jumping from a low sec station to uh, or you're gating from low sec to high sec. If you have a structure that's right next to the high sec gate, um, that is really nice because it means you can see what's happening on that gate as you're planning to warp to the gate and make your jump. On the flip side, there are benefits to stations. One of them is that docking access cannot be revoked by other players. So one of the big dangers of jump freering is if you jump to a structure, there is always the possibility that you could lose docking access. So you lose docking access, you undock your jump freighter, and then you see baddies on the undock, and so you quickly try to dock them. Well, you just lost docking access. Now you can't dock, and there's baddies on the undock. You don't have tether. You are you are in deep shit, my friend. Um, so that is the risk of structures. Stations don't have that. Stations don't have tether, but your access cannot be revoked by other players. They are also indestructible. So even if you have structures and you're not worried about suddenly losing your docking access, there is always the possibility that somebody might decide to knock over the sandcastle, as they say. If your structure gets blown up, well, now your route has to you have to rework your route. And this is especially true if you are a part of a big alliance and you have structures in systems that don't have stations for the convenience of jump freightering. Um, if that structure goes bye-bye, now you have to totally rethink your route, which is very annoying. And so for that reason, stations are much more reliable, and they're accessible to everyone. If you're not a part of a big alliance that has structures everywhere um, for logistical purposes, um, stations are what you have to work with most often. I would not recommend, unless you know the owners, unless you know who owns it, and you have an agreement that is darn near ironclad. Um, I would not recommend using neutral structures. Just use a station. Okay, it's not worth the risk. The risk is just too high. I've made the mistake myself. I've lost a jump freighter. It was not fun. Don't think that just because that structure is in the same militia as you, or um, because you you are like sort of aligned with that group, unless you're blue, unless you have that ironclad connection with them, don't trust it. Don't trust the structure, because there are lots of structures that are put up specifically for the purpose of trapping jump freighters, especially in places like Abazon, Rancier, um, things like that. So be careful. Stations also have station guns. Now, don't get overconfident here. Station guns are helpful because if somebody in a T1 ship, like they're a little frigate or whatever, decides they're going to try and kill your Cyno, the minute they start shooting your Cyno, the gate guns are going to start shooting them. Um, it is not guaranteed to kill them before your Cyno dies. Uh, I just assume that my Cynos, every single jump, one of my Cynos is going to die. Um, but, you know, there is a chance that the station guns might kill your aggressor before you die. Um, but I wouldn't count on it. Speaking of Cyno alts, you need at least one, and it needs to be on a separate account. You cannot, don't create a Cyno alt on the back of, or on the same account as your jump freighter. That's not going to work, okay? It needs to be on a separate account, and that account needs to be Omega, okay? Um, so at at bare minimum, your Cyno alt needs to have CPU management 5 and cynossural field theory 1. Okay, that's going to allow your alt to sit in a T1 hauler and light an industrial Cyno. Don't do that. Don't settle for that. That is a miserable, miserable thing. You are going to spend so much money in liquid ozone because it's so inefficient. It is such an it is so incredibly inefficient. And when you do a lot of jump freightering, the efficiency matters because the costs add up quickly. So don't waste a bunch of money on liquid ozone and having to replace these haulers all the time because you are so inefficient with your Cyno alts. To have a really good Cyno alt, you should train the following skills: cynossural field theory 4, warp drive operation 5, navigation 5, propulsion jamming 4, infomorph psychology 4, infomorph synchronizing 4, high speed maneuvering 4, and starship command 4. This will allow you to sit in a venture. You can line a Cyno. You can web your jump freighter so that it gets to warp quickly. which is very important for getting from low-sec to your high-sec gate, and then gating from your high-sec to high-sec to high-sec to your destination. Um, so that ball to Dixie portion of your trip, that's where you really want to be able to web down your jump freighter so that it gets to work faster. It's also just going to allow you to get around New Eden faster with your Cyno. And depending on what your setup is or how many alts you have, you may be moving your Cyno alt around a lot. Um, and so having good skills, having good navigation skills for your Cyno alt is important. Having the Infomorph psychology for and Infomorph synchronizing for means that you can put jump clones in certain stations where you frequently need a Cyno alt. And if you stage your venture, at least one venture, Cyno venture there, you'll be able to move around faster, which is very convenient. Um, but of course, not every system that you're going to go to is going to have a clone bay in the station or structure that you're Cynoing to. So when you jump your freighter, when you light that Cyno and jump your freighter, be very careful not to bounce your jump freighter. You're going to have a real bad time if you do. If you light a Cyno too close to the structure or jump or station and jump, there's a possibility that your jump freighter could land within the geometry of the structure or the station. And then what happens is your jump freighter gets bounced and just goes off in the opposite direction. And that's really bad because it can knock you outside of docking range. And now you have to, don't try to slow boat. If that does happen, don't try to slow boat back to the station. Just warp to somewhere else. And then warp back. You can avoid this by hovering your mouse over the industrial Cyno module. It's going to bring up this big red ball. This red ball is your zone of danger. I almost said zone of safety. It's zone of danger. If there is a station or structure within that red zone, you need to move your Cyno before lighting it, because otherwise you're in real trouble. Now, I'm noticing in this screenshot one other thing. See how this far side of the far side away from the structure, see how the red zone goes outside the ring, the docking ring? That's also danger, because if the jump freighter lands on the far side, they're outside of docking range, and they'll have to either slow boat in to dock, or they'll have to warp off to another station. So pay attention to this red circle of danger, right? And make sure that there's not a structure or a station inside your red zone of danger, okay? Now, the mechanics of actually jumping to your Cyno are this. You light your Cyno, right? You should have your Cyno alt on your watch list. You need to be in a fleet to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to light a Cyno or jump to a Cyno unless you're in fleet. Watch list your Cyno alt, right click on the Cyno alt, jump. You can also jump to Cynos from your capacitor, and in my alliance, in Shadow Cartel, they do this all the time, and I want to rip my hair out when people do this because it's extremely dangerous. Why? Because when you right click on your capacitor, and select jump to, every Cyno that is available to you, it could be a mobile Cyno, it could be a hostile Cyno, um, is going to show up in your list of Cynos, and you have to select the right one. If you select the wrong one, you are likely going to die. So, I, these are dangerous games that people play when they jump to capacitors. Now, I will say that with mobile Cynos, um, which are handy in certain circumstances, with a mobile Cyno, um, you don't really have the option. You can't watch list a mobile Cyno. You have to do it from the capacitor. Um, it's it's super dangerous. I hate using mobile Cynos. Sometimes you don't have the option, but be extremely careful, and I recommend that you use your watch list. Don't do it from your capacitor. As soon as you undock, you will have a 3 to 5 second delay. This is a session change timer. As soon as that expires, jump. Don't wait any longer because you have a limited window of invulnerability, whether you're undocking from a structure or a station. You have a limited window of invulnerability. Obviously, if you're undocking from a structure, you're going to have tether, so it's not as big of a deal. But when it comes to stations, you need to jump as soon as you can. Once you have made it to the other side and the grid is loaded, dock as soon as possible. With structures, you can do it immediately. With stations, there is a 3 to 5 second delay. Um, and I say 3 to 5 seconds, there's an exact number on the server side, but how you experience it in real time might be like a second or two longer. Um, so that's why I say 3 to 5 seconds cooldown. Dock as soon as you can. You're invulnerable for a couple seconds there once you've jumped, but you need to dock as soon as possible because you don't want to risk getting bumped or anything like that outside of the docking ring. If you undock and there is an issue with your Cyno or you notice something's off, just redock immediately. I will warn you that some stations you cannot redock immediately. And this is something you should test with your Cyno alt, right? So you're going around and um, you're looking for a good station um, to Cyno to test with your Cyno alt. Test it, just undock, and then try to redock as soon as possible. If your Cyno alt gets pushed outside of the docking ring before you're able to redock, that's what's called a kickout station. You don't want to use that one. That's too dangerous. You need to have the option to redock as soon as possible. Uh, Once the Cyno is lit, your Cyno alt is stuck in space, unable to move, tether, dock, or log out for 10 minutes. Anticipate that your Cyno alt is going to die. Just be ready for that. Ventures and T1 haulers are extremely squishy, and lots of people um, just it's part of their gameplay that they just kill these Cyno alts when they see them in space. Um, they're very easy to kill, so just assume that it's going to die and plan accordingly. We'll talk about what you should do to plan accordingly. But just plan that it's going to die. Be ready to dock the capsule as soon as it dies. Don't just leave your capsule out in space, especially if you're outside of a station. All right, so we're going to talk jump mechanics real quick. I know this is a bit complicated when we're just talking theory and you don't have the practical experience of it. But uh, when you jump, you are going to accumulate what's called jump fatigue, and you're also going to have jump activation. Typically, players refer to these as blue timer and red timer. Your jump fatigue is blue timer. Your jump activation is red timer. Um, you cannot jump again while you have a red timer. Um, and your jump fatigue accumulates at a base of 10 times 1 minute plus light, 1 plus 1, sorry. It's 10 times 1 plus the number of light years you traveled, minutes, right? Now, this number doesn't look right to me from my experience. That might be right. If somebody has updated numbers for me, send me a link to the documentation because that number just doesn't look right to me. That math doesn't look right to me from my experience, but it might be right. Um, Jump activation accumulates at a base of 1 minute per light year traveled. Okay? So if jump freighters can travel a maximum range of 10 light years, so your max jump fatigue is going to be, or jump activation is going to be 10 minutes. Now, if you jump after the red timer expires but before the blue timer expires, you will stack additional jump fatigue and have a longer jump activation timer. Your jump fatigue, the blue timer, accumulates at a rate of your jump fatigue plus 1 times 1 plus the light years traveled to a maximum of 5 hours. It used to be a lot longer than that, but now it's capped at 5 hours. Your jump activation accumulates at 10% of your jump fatigue plus the base, your base accumulation, to a maximum of 30 minutes. So if you're really maxing out your jump fatigue and jump activation, you could end up having to wait 30 minutes just to do your next jump. So watch out for that. Okay. So before we wrap up, I have one more thing I want to advise you of. I highly recommend that you keep a freight container in your jump freighter that is just for your stuff. This is just for things that you need as the jump freighter pilot that you need to keep with you. This is your trunk if you're in the US, or your boot if you're in the UK. The trunk is where you keep extra supplies, things like extra ventures plus the fittings for those ventures, extra liquid ozone, extra isotopes, that's your jump freighter fuel. You want your tank and cargo refits, right? Because just like with regular freighters, you're going to swap your fits based on whether you have where you are. If you're jumping, you want the economizers or you want the expanded cargo holds. If you're going through Hisec or you're gating for any reason, you want max tank. You can also put anything else that your jump freighter pilot needs to carry that isn't part of your cargo. If you're hauling for other people, it's really convenient to have a little amount of space to put your own crap. You need that shit on separated from everything else, especially when you're cargo hauling. Now, I use a freight container that has 50 50k meters cubed. That's a considerable amount of space. That's a considerable. You may not need all that. Um, because of the amount of hauling that I do, I generally keep a lot of ventures and their fittings in here. You may only carry one extra venture in your freighter. That's a bit spicy in my opinion, but do what works for you. The worst that happens is that you then have to, you're going to lose time because you have to reship your Cyno all far away and then gate back to the system where you're going to light the Cyno. That's the worst that can happen, and that would be a pain in the butt, especially if you're way out in deep null. That would be a real pain in the butt, but you could do it. Um, so that's that. Now, this is not a live class. There are no people in attendance. So if you have questions, leave them as a comment on this video. I will try to answer as many of them as possible. I know this is a lot, and we're talking theory for something that is um, better understood when you can practice it as well, which is why the Eve University How Not to Die in a Jump Freighter is oftentimes done as a practical, but we just don't have that option without risking people's jump freighters, and that's a pretty spicy proposition. Uh, but I wish you all the best. Fly safely, folks.